You are listening to Investing Matters, brought to you in association with London South East. This is the show that provides informative, educational and entertaining content from the world of investing. We do not give advice, so please do your own research.
Hello and welcome to the Investing Matters podcast. My name is Peter Higgins, and today I have the privilege of speaking with Stephen Kelly. In June 2020, Stephen was appointed the chair of Tech Nation, the UK's leading growth platform for tech startups and entrepreneurs. Stephen's personal commitment to the UK tech sector spans many roles. He is currently the chair of the Science and Technology Honours Committee, board member of the number 10 Innovations of the Science and Technology Honours Committee, board member of the Fellowship Programme, director of Locum's Nest, chair at the Algorithm People, senior advisor to Blackrock, as well as an investor in high growth companies. And we can't go any further without saying Stephen is also the former CEO of global tech giants Sage, Micro Focus and Chordiant. Welcome, Stephen.
Great to be here, Peter, and I've listened to previous podcasts, so I'm absolutely delighted to be with you today.
Thank you very much, and it's a delight to have you on. I've watched your journey, your meteoric rise, and your continued rise for some time, Stephen. So thank you for joining us on this podcast.
Great stuff. No, it'd be fun.
I want to start, if I may, Stephen, with a quote here, given your journey. So Stephen Hawking, the famous English theoretical physicist, cosmologist, and author, said, "Intelligence is the ability to adapt to change." Stephen, what are the earliest experiences that very much shaped you and your values?
Yeah, I guess probably like all of us is growing up, and I came from a pretty hard-working small business background with my parents. Went to a state school, and so one of the things I really shaped me is kind of leaving my home, where a lot of guys, in my classmates who are smarter than me in some ways, went off to kind of work at British Rail in the ticket office, or down at customs in Dover, or behind the counter at Barclays Bank, and they sort of got trapped by the environment and the aspiration level of that peer group. Fortunately, in some respects, when you look back, I went away and I was the first in my generation to go to college. I got a full grant, and then really never looked back. And I've been very fortunate back in the 80s to go to an early stage company at the time, Oracle, and spend 9 years there. But the whole mantra, of companies, and it's very true, when we look fast forward to building value for all stakeholders, you got to, as a company, grow fast or sadly die slowly. And some of the things that shaped me early on have stood the test of time. So the core values, the culture, doing the right thing, being kind to people, respectful, speak truth under power, just have that fantastic energy. And probably the biggest thing to define me, I'll be honest, is hard work. Hard work. My mum used to say, hard work killed no one. And in my family at the time, when I was a teenager, sadly, my father had a nervous breakdown, probably had mental health issues, and had to sell the business. So that was a rude awakening. So literally, at the age of 14, I'd be going up to the seafront selling ice creams. I'd be delivering 2 paper routes, whatever it took. And we had to, at that time, pay £5 back into the family kitty just to survive. So we had our own very personal kind of cost of living crisis, sold a car, downsized houses, all that sort of stuff. And that was a really kind of visual, rude awakening to the world of life. And it meant I had to grow up really quickly. Myself and brother and sister, we just had to go out and get jobs as well as staying at school. To create some income stream for the family to survive. And I've just kind of seen the impact of what hard work does and what graft can do. And you could win the lottery, but generally the people who are very successful, it doesn't happen by accident. There's normally some sort of plan and a hell of a lot of hard work.
Yeah, I agree with you, and thank you for that response. Now, you mentioned just briefly there, I want to go back a little bit. Stephen, that you and your siblings were the first generation in your family to go to university. How did that time at the University of Bath studying business administration awaken your business appetite?
Oh yeah, and definitely, Peter. Not only that, I had sort of massive imposter syndrome because I'd sort of never met people from public schools and all that sort of stuff, and there was all these people popping up from Dulwich College and Winchester, and I was in awe of them, to be honest with you, at the age of 18. But I soon really got the bug. I always just love business. I love the complexity and the multifaceted nature of, back to your question, first of all, around, the intellectual challenge. But many people can define a great strategy, but it's really the magic happens when you execute that strategy. And we always actually said in the software world, A class strategy and B class execution is always inferior to B class strategy and A class execution. But if you get the magic of A class strategy and A class execution, you're just unstoppable. And I got the zen of business from talking both the guys on the course, but also the teaching. But the nice thing about Bath was it was thin sandwich courses, so we went off to industry. And I went off to companies like, actually at the time, BP, and again, like the big city, just kind of bright lights and working with these incredible people in industry. You learn really, really quickly. And again, actually, the kindness people showed me, and I think this is the case still today, in terms of mentoring, coaching, and really kind of growing the next generation of entrepreneurs, stood with me and stood the test of time. And now I'm very lucky that I can give back in that way too.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that because I've had a sense that since you were quite young, going to school, going to the university, that there's a sense of you purposely throughout all the things that you've done about giving back to support essentially state school children, minority and disadvantaged groups. I wanted if you could do that right now, just share some of the work that you've done regarding that over the years.
Yeah, it's been important to me, and myself actually and great friends, a guy called Dr. Steve Garnett, who was chair of Salesforce, of a similar background to me. He came from a sort of council house in Liverpool. The interesting thing is just we definitely just keep our feet on the ground. You never forget where you come from, and you just kind of bless every day that you're given the opportunities that we have been. But that fills us with a great sense of responsibility to make a difference to the next generation and kind of help kids similar to us who have disadvantages. And it could be around ethnicity, it could be gender, because the barriers are very real, whether it's conscious bias or unconscious bias. And therefore, what I've done throughout my career, particularly now, is actually mentor and coach, particularly female entrepreneurs, Black founders, and spend time with them. And obviously, that's all pro bono. And it's just a joy to see them smashing through ceilings and achieving probably sometimes what they didn't think was possible. So yeah, it's hugely rewarding. I think it's really important because otherwise it won't happen. And we'll just, be in a self-perpetuating world where the elite just dominate the airways, and the people with huge talent, absolute brilliant intellect, great entrepreneurs will be deprived of the opportunity.
I love that you're doing that piece of work. And you touched on their unconscious bias. And when you finished uni, you applied for numerous graduate jobs, were turned down for numerous times, and then you eventually got a job with ICL. You was accepted on their graduate program. So that must have been an absolute catalyst for you going forward. Tell us a little bit about that, please, Stephen.
Yeah, and in those days it was kind of the early 80s, so there was mass unemployment. It was kind of a restructuring of the economy with the decimation of the steelworks, the coal mines, and the sort of first generation industrial revolution that had created a lot of the wealth for Britain. So there's massive structural change, and I applied like loads of guys from the course. for tons of jobs. One of my colleagues actually applied for 249 jobs. In those days, you had to handwrite applications and was rejected by all of them. Then actually, ironically, got a job with Nomura, the Japanese bank, and went off and was hugely successful and became bilingual in Japanese. But for me, again, it's good. It's good to deal with rejection and also to think about, put yourself in the shoes. That great word of empathy. Put yourself in the shoes of the people who are looking at you and thinking about what their needs are and what their wants are. And I was very fortunate that eventually I got a job at ICL on their grad program. Now, the thing that really gave me a gift was in those days, the companies like obviously the Mars, the IBMs, the ICLs invested massively in graduates. It was almost like the university of life wrapped up into, we went away for a 12-week residential in a hotel, and we were sort of trained in all the core skills of business, the platform skills, like presentation skills, communication skills, how to do business planning, budgeting, as well as technology skills. So that was just an incredible sort of finishing school in that graduate program. And I think it's a kind of a shame. Companies seem to have lost that in terms of, when you come out of college at 21, it really is a fantastic opportunity if you've got to work with the best people in terms of letting you understand how to build a business plan, how to build a marketing plan, product plans, and also how to have the highest levels of behaviors and effective behaviors to get the job done. Because it's all back to not only have the plan, but it's also about the execution that matters. And the great companies I've worked for were typically companies that had awesome execution. And ICL, nice British company at the time, probably got overtaken by the competition, particularly from the US. But in terms of what it gave me, in terms of a platform of core skills and competences, I've never forgotten. And even today, almost 40 years later, they've held me in great stead, just around how to build great companies, how to be part of the team, and how to contribute in the most effective way.
Brilliant. I love that. Now, around 3 years later, in 1988, you began working in public sector sales for a little-known early-stage company with only £12 million in revenue in the UK. A little company called Oracle, if I recall. Please can you share with us how this opportunity came about and why at the time people around you felt this was not the best opportunity for you, Stephen?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Now, I was actually at an investor lunch with a lot of the sort of founding team from the European team of Oracle yesterday. And, the friendships actually have lasted all that time and a real bond of what we achieved together, but also, the friendships that last as strong as ever they were then. But Oracle back then was just a no-name company selling this thing called a relational database that no one understood. And very early stage, as you rightly say. But it was a company with tremendous ambition and a disruption agenda about how to create a new paradigm that was very important to things that we just take for granted now, like the internet and devices and all those sort of things, because you had to. It's all about data, and we all consume massive amounts of data. And this was a great way to organize data very differently. So I joined the sort of startup team, early stage in Europe at the time. And I remember, my friends, actually parents, thought I was completely bonkers because no one will remember who's sort of less than 40. But at the time in the 80s, there were some technologies called teletext. So you had your TV and it streamed this news feed. And there was only two sort of dominant players in the UK, CFAX and then Oracle and ITV. And they all thought I was kind of going to work for the kind of CFAX equivalent for the ITV. So they said, why would you do that? And then I told them, actually, it's a software company. And they thought I was even madder But looking back at that, again, Oracle, it does it in those days, 12 years, 11 out of those 12 years had triple digit growth. During my tenure, I was there 9 years. Most years we kind of delivered in our division triple digit growth. That's like 100% compound growth. And that creates, it is a bit of a roller coaster, obviously, and your feet hardly touch the ground. However, it's a great learning culture. You're working with the smartest and the best people, and also a really strong culture around customer obsession, doing the right thing. In some that sort of taught me. There's a couple of things. If there's any kind of wannabe CEOs out there and entrepreneurs and founders, but there's kind of, you look at all the complexity of business, but it comes back to real simplicity. There's kind of two lenses that really, really matter. There's lots of lenses, but two are paramount. One is obviously innovation around customer success and customer obsession, and build that into the culture of the company. So if you love your customers and you actually delight them and they become raving fans and advocates, you've got a great business. But how you do that is go and hire the best people and build the best culture in the team, and then direct all your people to add in really great value for your customers. And you do that, it's almost two sides of the perfect coin. Hire the best people, build a great culture, build that team that absolutely excels and has huge aspiration. And then connect those people with customers and obviously innovate through brilliant products. You've got a great business. And not everything looks after itself, but actually that's a great foundation to build a good business. And I learned that back at Oracle. And I did four or five different jobs there, European alliances, built really great partnerships, ran public sector for a while. And it was a really a showcase where I work with brilliant people who have become friends for life. And now we actually co-invest. And I mentioned a couple of people, other people like Jeff Squire. A lot of these guys do a huge amount of philanthropic work for the next generation, for minorities, as well as really wise investments to help the next generation of companies grow in the UK.
Brilliant. I love that you cottoned on to the importance from ICL and also then Oracle about the customer, and building a culture there for everybody to actually thrive, which is really important. Now, I'm going to ask an ironic question here, if I may. Do you recall when you were leaving Oracle what the actual UK sales were around approximation, going from 12?
Actually, I remember the worldwide sales was probably it was well over $1 billion. I remember the charts, the visuals, like 25 million, 48 million. So it was literally kind of almost doubling every year. And there was a crazy analogy at the time. It was almost like the M25. You add another lane and you double the volume of the traffic. And we had a really good, what actually I should say as well, Oracle it was the finishing school of, the teaching hospital of how to build global software companies. And obviously it's no accident that people like Mark Benioff, who founded Salesforce, Tom Siebel, who founded Siebel Systems, Polly Sumner, there's loads of people that I work with who have gone on to be hugely successful. The guys who started PeopleSoft all came from that kind of school, that cadre of the elite core at Oracle. And all kind of understood that, not revenue cures all evils, but ultimately it does. And if you've got growth, and then it means you can invest more in the product, in the business, you can hire the best people, you can outgun your competitors, and really it creates a virtuous circle, a flywheel of success. And those people, have gone on to build huge multi-billion dollar companies around the world. But it did teach me kind of the playbooks, even down to the granular level, what great looks like in terms of a sales compensation plan, or a business plan, or an HR plan, or a product plan, or a marketing launch plan, or an event plan to run a big conference, whatever it is. It was almost a bit like there's Blue Peter style. Here's one we did earlier, and it worked in the US. And ironically, back in the 80s, when we used to fly into France and Germany, I'm sure in the very early days back then, that they'd be pretty pleased that either these Americans or these folks got back on the plane and left them to run their own business. And then we definitely heard in those days, well, it's very interesting what you're saying. It's very American, but France is different, or Spain is different. When you're building global software companies, 90% of what you're doing works everywhere in the world. Obviously, you have to be sensitive to culture, language, traditions, and sensitive to those. But effectively, you can build these global playbooks of global product launches. Whereas when we went there, in reality, everybody did it differently. Everything was fragmented, but everything became the same. And that was the time when global software companies really had their genesis and they had their platform. And it allows companies like Apple and Google and all these companies to then really accelerate the globalization of technology. And when I came back to the UK as CEO of people like Focus and Sage, ironically, it was going back in a time warp. It was almost like back to the future in time and going back to the 80s. Because when I went to those companies, every country did it differently. Every country had a country MD and it was totally autonomous. There was no consistency in terms of product planning, customer, or even culture, or even branding. So it just meant huge proliferation, huge fragmentation, load of wasted cost, really inefficient operations. And it required a root and branch review. And then to implement, I hate to call it like the US model, but it's just the successful playbooks of what I learned way back at Oracle that really stand most great companies in good stead today.
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Micro Focus and Sage a bit later on. But I wanted to touch on this little bit here in around 1997, Stephen. You've had a really fantastic run and success at Oracle, and you joined the founding team at Chordiant, where you became their first, it was your first CEO role. Please can you share with us how that came about? Obviously, you're doing all this work with Oracle, you're going across the world, lots of people are looking at you thinking, this guy's going places. How did that come about? And can you tell us a little bit about the successful listing as well that happened a few years later on the NASDAQ for Chordiant?
Yeah, so what we did was I got a call from the chairperson, Carol Eleni, at Chordiant, and it was a really kind of innovative company. That spark of disruption was wanting to change the world for the whole proposition of what Chordiant did was make financial services consumers and customers well-being much more improved. So if you remember in those days, you'd have loads of credit cards probably, and you'd have to call a different 1-800 number for each of your credit card providers, even if it was the same company, like, I don't know, make it up Citigroup. The people you talk to in one call center wouldn't have a clue about you in the other. And you could be a Citi customer for 30 years and you're talking to a customer services rep who doesn't know anything about you or your history with the bank. And that's no criticism of the customer services rep. That just means they haven't got the data in front of them. And really also things like, what's the best process to take you through, if you lost your credit card or whatever the process element is. So Chordiant had a vision to give like multi-channel, single view of the customer, to make the world of the customer much better. And that's still relevant today in kind of modern fintechs, interestingly. So it was an early stage fintech before we knew what the word meant. And I took the fundamentals of what we took out of Oracle is, the vision of what we wanted to achieve and the ambition we had, translated that to a set of strategies that we thought would work, built the plan around that using sort of end result planning techniques about what we wanted to do. That was 1997. We said, what do we want to do and what do we want to be proud of by the year 2000? So it was kind of quite a galvanizing rallying cry. And we got the whole team in that. We got customers involved in that as well. And that actually defined like a 3-year plan that made a 1-year plan and made a quarterly plan. And then we defined what sort of culture we wanted in terms of innovation, customer obsession, all those sort of things. Just 3 or 4 things that matter. And then we went about kind of executing the plan, and we had huge success. So we become the market leader in financial services. And we won prestigious banks, like Barclays, Lloyds TSB over here, Direct Line in the US, some of the biggest, MetLife, USAA, which is probably the best insurance company in the world. They serve veterans in the USA out of San Antonio. So we got the highest quality customers really connected on this vision to improve the lives of their consumers and serve them in a radically different way, in a joined up way that could really serve the purpose of the consumers rather than these what was product-based businesses in the bank. And we went from like 0 to $100 million of revenue in 4 years. So it's just like explosive. And actually, an interesting thing, Peter, in those days, we just worried about doing the right things for the business, doing the right things for the customer, doing the right things in terms of hitting the plans and exceeding them, doing the right things in terms of product innovation, looking after our people. And the valuation, we always thought would look after itself because you'll find the right level. What I've found in the last 3 or 4 years, I'll be honest, is probably a over fascination with valuation. So obviously the term we have now is unicorns and decacorns. Unicorn is a company worth $1 billion. Again, we didn't even know what that term meant back then, but we got back in kind of just before the crash. Actually, we went out to the public markets 2000 and listed on the Nasdaq. Fantastic IPO, big IPO roadshow. We did about 176 presentations to potential investors in New York, Boston, London, Amsterdam. And we got a valuation of $2 billion on day one of the IPO. So, we were a unicorn fintech, really hot company, super high growth company, sort of triple digit growth company. And again, that sort of taught me, Peter, and the thing that drives me in some ways is just the curiosity of whether these models work and these playbooks work, in that case, from a big company, which when I left Oracle, it was, but we'd obviously started it from a very small company, but then looking at a real startup, a founding team, and whether the same models would work, and they work beautifully. And we delivered huge success, customers at the center of it. We used to have executive customer advisory boards. We used to have customers in the room on product management meetings. So not only was there a lot of innovation, but it was really centered around serving the customer. And these guys, I can't, and they're good friends still today. Some of the customers, both from the US and over in Europe and Asia, some of the biggest banks in the world, biggest insurance companies in the world, really wanted to invest in a different paradigm of how to serve customers. And we see that sort of carry on in the fintech revolution that's going on today. But I think what it taught me was absolutely the playbooks work incredibly well. Secondly, what it taught me was that it's great to be part of a founding team. I've never done that before, working and living in the Valley with the best people, companies like General Atlantic as investors, Foundation Capital, Battery Ventures, these literally rainmakers from the Valley that would be sitting. And the other final thing, actually, I was so lucky to have an incredible board, probably the best board I've ever sat on as a CEO. Well, absolutely, by a country mile. And we had people like George Reyes, who was the first CFO of Google, on our board. We had Catherine Gould from Foundation Capital. And we used to hang out with the Google guys in the early days, 97, 98. And it's just amazing to see. At that time, it's probably fair to say they sort of had a dream and an aspiration, but they didn't necessarily have all the pieces of the puzzle on the pathway to success. And they found that through iteration. Great businesses tend to do this. You sort of have a vision of the end goal, and you mobilize all the team to actually deliver that and put customers at the heart of the business. But then obviously you iterate, and that's the element of great culture. And you learn on the way, and you lose those kind of lessons learned to build great process systems and innovation at the heart of the company that allows you ultimately to become your market leader. And the difference I found, even now, where US companies, we always in the board the whole conversation was, how are we going to become the global market leader? And in our sector, in financial services, which, retail banking, insurance, we became the global market leader. We had 12 of the top financial institutions as customers. and absolutely kind of ripped it away from any potential competition, which was old-fashioned technology, legacy technology. And we set up a great platform, great culture, and a lot of fun. And again, I'm really pleased to see folks have gone on to do amazing things who are part of the Chordiant School. And they've gone off to be CEOs of their own companies and hugely successful careers. And I think, as a leader, there's a couple of things. One is it's an absolute joy to be able to say every company you joined, you left in much better shape than when you joined it. And you created not necessarily a legacy, but everything. When you looked at how customers were, how product innovation was, how people were, how the culture was, how the performance was, how the growth was, everything in terms of material factors, it was much better than when you found it. And the second thing is it's really rewarding when you see the people who worked within your company go off to pursue their own careers and become chief executives and chairs, are wildly successful in their own rights. And just a little bit of that's probably down to what they learned when they were part of the team.
Brilliant. I love that response. Thank you ever so much, Stephen. Now, I want to go back just a tad. Please, can you share with us and our listeners your recollection and experience of the dot-com bubble and the crash? Because obviously you talked about Chordiant having this meteoric rise, but it's also almost met with the other side of that, which everyone experienced during the 2000s.
Yeah, it was amazing. So, and it happened only months after our IPO. So you go from giddy heights and altitude sickness. And in the valley, certainly, it did get irrational, but people saw, dot-com companies were almost invincible. And the fad became mainstream. However, obviously it's completely mad for companies to be valued at $1 billion just on the basis of a business plan and the credibility of the management team. Just doesn't kind of make sense. You want the fundamentals of customers and revenue and products, that make a great business. But I remember, it was a big shock for the Valley, but it also is testament to how quickly the American culture kind of resets itself. So back in 2000, 2001, we'd go from a booming economy where you couldn't hire people for love nor money, to just a massive collapse with 1 million, I think it was about 1 million unemployed within 9 months, massive reduction in forces, as we called them at the time, layoffs, loads of lessons learned from that. So I'd drive down from the city, San Francisco, back to sort of Palo Alto and Cupertino, down either the 101 or the 280. And we'd see either side of the freeway, these what we called see-through offices, where literally all this real estate had been built and a year before had been jammed full because you couldn't get real estate and it was ridiculous commercial rental value. It just collapsed. It went from whatever it was, $50 to $2, per square foot. But more importantly, literally 1 million people have gone home. And I remember the rate of unemployment went up from, I think it was 2% to 11% in 9 months. And folks have gone back to the Midwest. Folks have gone back to Asia, literally to kind of reset their careers and go in search of work. So that's kind of one thing I realized about the American culture. People go wherever the work is. And, today it's great to see mass migration because we need it. At the moment, the UK is kind of at the moment on its knees to hire people, whether you're in hospitality, pubs, restaurants. I think it was the case only recently that a whole floor of the Ritz was closed because they can't get the cleaning employees. And in technology, we are dying for product managers and software developers. So migration of talent is such an important strategy for any country. And we saw that, and it's no accident the US is the greatest economy in the world at the moment. It's been really forged around migration. And the talent we had and also the culture we had in the Valley was, very, very, very much probably more very consistent, very aligned, multicultural, cosmopolitan, and a real buzz and sense of energy. And then we go from, a massive shock from the dot-com where a lot of companies collapsed, disappeared, ran out of money and went out of business. Now, what I said for us as well, we actually kind of tailed off on the growth, and we weren't. So two things, lessons learned for me is one, during that time is we actually kind of missed a quarter. And I've probably done as a CEO of a public company almost 50 quarters. And there's a couple that we miss. For technology companies, I think the statistic was normally technology companies miss 1 in 6 quarters. So we've done pretty well. However, the sickness you feel in your gut when you miss a quarter as a CEO is so palpable. There's loads of things I share with you. First of all, the internal projective with our colleagues. So when we had to sadly lay off some of our colleagues that we'd kind of projected the business plan for triple-digit growth, and that hadn't materialized because some of the customer spending slowed down because of the recession. What it meant was we needed to correct the cost base. And we did that literally really, really quickly. So we reset the cost base, but also what is really important is you're consistent with the culture of the way you do it about compassion and kindness to colleagues. So actually at that time we did a reduction in force, and a great guy, Jim Hancock, who ran part of the engineering team, left as part of that process. And he said to me subsequently about a year later, he said probably the way you did that as a company was as compassionate and caring as you possibly could have done. And we actually funded a leaving party for them all, and he held it in his yard, which is equivalent to the back garden in the UK terminology. And we try to look after people as best as we could. The other thing that was really important, this message, we're all in it together. During that time, myself and the executive team took 3 salary cuts. So initially we took 20% cut, then another 10%, and then another. So we were working at a salary level. We were working harder than we'd ever done, but we were working at a massively reduced salary because we want to have the integrity with our colleagues to say, look, we've got no crystal ball. We don't know whether the environment's going to improve or get worse, but we've taken all the actions that we think are necessary. But also, we're in this together. This is painful for all of us. It's horrible to see colleagues that we love going. But it's important for you to know that we've taken salary cuts and actually taken some of the pain too. So I think that's important. I think that's a real essence of leadership and integrity, and looking people in the eye and saying, yeah, generally we're all in this together. The other thing I'd say from an investor point of view, I know a lot of investors out there, everybody says the investors are totally rational, data-driven. There's a couple of things I'll tell you about that time. There was a survey done, I don't know if this is still the case, but this is 20 years ago, of investors, fund managers in the US. And they did loads of university, I think it was Harvard or something like that. They did loads of analysis of investor decisions on fund managers buying stocks, individual stocks, stock picking. And they found, obviously they thought it would all be objective data around market opportunity, total addressable market, the TAM, product innovation, competitors, growth, free cash flow, all the things you care about management team. But they actually found 70% of the buying decisions were based on both the confidence and the body language of the CFO and the CEO. So, wow, and in those days, the roadshow, it was like Groundhog Day. Every quarter, we get on a plane, we go to Boston, New York, Philly, fly to London, maybe once a year go to Amsterdam, Milan, Paris, Chicago. And then you do all these kind of banker conferences, Boca Raton, Ritz-Carlton down in Palo Alto. And we probably, as a CEO, we probably spend 30-40% of our time out with investors. So what we thought, actually, another factor, my chairman, who was probably the best chairman I've had, Sam Spadafora, fabulous human being, but also worked directly with Scott McNeely, building Sun to be a great technology company. Sam and I talked, and there's a lot of companies in the dot-com crash that disappeared from the radar of investors and stopped doing roadshows. And I used to on the calls say, look, guys, we've just got to get our heads down. We've got to get through this. we don't know what the environment's going to bring and changes, but we're doing all the right things in the business, but we're still going to come out to see you investors and talk to you and make sure you know we're here and we're really committed. So we worked harder than we ever worked during that period, that couple of years. But we also went on the road. We went to all our big investors. We did face-to-face meetings with them. And Sam used to say, I think it's easy to be happy in the good times, but it's much more important to be there in the bad times, and be shoulder to shoulder with investors. And, I know on this, I'm sure a lot of investors know this, investors are the most rational people, but boy, oh boy, investors get incredibly emotional when things go wrong. And if they look at the screen, it's all red. Even for seasoned investors, your heart sinks. And it's important to know that the companies you've backed and invested in, and you went to your portfolio managers and backed, are there for you, and making sure that you're one of the key stakeholders, that they're doing all the right things in the business. So fascinating insights. And with all these things, Peter, you've got to go through some bad times to really not only appreciate the good times, but to understand even more than ever, you've got to keep your feet on the ground. You never get ahead of yourself. You never believe your own PR. You just always think, what do we do? And there's almost that relentless continuous improvement, because there's always, even in the greatest companies in the world, there's always things they can do better, and there's always a new competitor out there kind of yapping at their ankles to make them grow faster. And that competition that we found after the dot-com crash actually was really healthy to drive even more innovations. And you know this and I know this, in those recessions, some of the greatest companies have been born. So Microsoft back in the 70s, after the oil crisis, then some of the greatest companies, Uber coming out of the credit crunch. I'm not suggesting they're a great company, but they're disruptive and innovative. And so that innovation has really kind of been a kind of keynote to come out of some of the biggest recessions. And that period at the time of the dot-com crash, and seeing all those see-through offices and the despondency is kind of really a thing that I kept. Final bit of a story is actually probably a year before the dot-com crash, I used to get, so we're hiring a head of engineering. She would come into my office and say, actually, I want to do a salary sacrifice because I want to have all my compensation in stock, because everybody kind of, could see their way to being millionaires and all that stuff. And I'd say, oh, no, what you want to do is have salary, you want to pay your mortgage, look after your family, all that sort of stuff. So the irrational behavior from people as well, saying everything's stock, doesn't make sense. And then, ironically, 6 months after the dot-com crash, I had a lot of colleagues come to me and say, oh, we don't want the stock. Can we have a pay rise? So I guess as a CEO, you can't see around corners, and you never pretend you can, but you just want to keep people balanced and sensible and keep everybody's feet on the ground and look after their well-being. Obviously from a point of view of getting the best out of them, but also making sure they look after themselves.
The continuation throughout all the conversation I've had with you so far, and there's a phrase I've seen you use in an article I've read, and it's about your passion for ethical capitalism. Can we just talk about that a little bit? It's about not only are you taking everybody with you and saying you're going to do something and actually following through on it.
Yeah, I believe, and I think there's a few people. There's a couple of things to say. One is, when you go to the States, I was there for almost over 10 years. You get forgotten about in the UK. It may not be the case now with like social media, but you sort of get forgotten about. But also the second thing, so you have to, when you come back to the UK, sort of reestablish. It's almost like, I guess, in the old days when expats used to go out to open the office in Singapore, they get forgotten about. And you have to start all over again when you come back to the UK. But the reason why I'm telling you that is the mainstream, I guess, narrative around business, particularly at the moment, is probably quite caustic and all that, energy bosses, fat cats. But I generally believe a lot of the business leaders I've met are very compassionate, kind, and want to make a big difference to the communities they serve. So there's two things I'd say. and this is important to your investors as well. Me as a CEO, I didn't obsess every day about profitability or maximizing the value of the company. I never did that. What I always thought about is how in the long term can we build short-term plans to become the market leader, but to do all the things that really matter for all of our stakeholders. So that does mean really engaged colleagues and employees, building amazing product and delighting customers. That does mean customers that become raving fans and advocates for your company and recommend us to other kind of really important prospective buyers of your technology. That does mean that you have to look after your partners and your suppliers, highly ethically, and you have to pay them within 30 days. And all these things we embedded in the policies of the company. So rapid payment, to do the right thing for every one of your stakeholders. And one of the key stakeholders, obviously, is your investors that provide the growth capital for your success. But the thing that investors can sleep well at night is if you're investing in companies where the CEO and the board are obsessing about doing the right things in the business, hiring the best people and unleashing their energies to delight customers. And then obviously having a governance and high integrity environment that the reporting and transparency is second to none, then actually you've got a fabulous business and they will be the best returning companies in your portfolio. But be assured that the chief executive is not obsessing about the stock price. The stock price looks after itself. If we deliver fabulous results and we're delivering triple-digit growth every year, then actually probably the share price over the long term will be doubling every year. I learned that back at Oracle, where literally the stock price doubled every year, and we did a stock split pretty much everywhere, 2-for-1 stock split every year. Never paid a dividend because we thought actually the investors would much prefer us to do reinvestment of every pound of profit back into the business for further growth. Because if you've got a management team with a plan to be market leader and the energies and the competence and capability to execute against that, then you want to back them. And we used to say in the US, this is interesting, it's very counterintuitive to the UK picture. When you start paying dividends and you do share buybacks, we used to call that window dressing, because basically it is absolutely the reality that the management teams run out of ideas of how to grow. If you've got brilliant ideas of growth, overseas expansion, new product development, you want every bit of profitability going back into investing in the business for growth. And then, in the long term, you will be absolutely providing much more superior returns to your investors.